Hey everybody, this is Russ from Metro Game Core. Today we're going to talk about custom software options for the BATLEXP G350 handheld. A couple weeks ago I did a review of this guy, and it's one of my favorite budget picks right now because this retails for $35. I've seen it going for cheaper, and it has really excellent build quality. Now, in my review video, I talked about the fact that this thing feels like it's built by Anbernic. Just the overall design, the buttons themselves, I mean, everything about it just looks like an Anbernic handheld other than the name. And when I asked my contact about it, they said that they could neither confirm nor deny their involvement with it. So I don't know what that means, and I think you should take that for what it's worth, but if I had to guess, if I was a betting person, then yeah, I would say that they're behind this device as well. And to add on to that, I had a couple review units just arrive on my doorstep the other day, and sure enough, they were sent over by my Anbernic contact. So yeah, I think that my suspicions are probably true at this point. And these are the two colors they sent over. So we have the pink transparent model, like the one that I reviewed earlier that I had purchased myself, and then they have this retro DMG gray. And it's funny because these look completely different from one another, even though they have the exact same shell. Like this one just looks a little bit more old school and sophisticated, while this one just has a lot of pop to it. I know a lot of people actually really enjoy this transparent pink model. Either way, in this video, what we're going to do is take a look at the stock software, so what comes with it, and then we'll talk about two of the most viable options that we have right now and how they can enhance your gameplay experience, both at a beginner level as well as at an intermediate or advanced level. Let's start by talking about the stock operating system. Now, this device will come with a microSD card. This is going to have the operating system, and it's also going to be loaded up with games. Everything is residing within this card. And honestly, the operating system itself is good enough. You know, you can navigate through, you can pick your system, and then find your game and then launch it from here. They've even added art for a lot of these games. And you've got a good amount of systems to choose from, but bear in mind that there are some inconsistencies. For example, the themes are not great. Like, it'll show the Game Boy logo, but it doesn't show SNES logo or a Nintendo logo, so things are just kind of wonky. Additionally, the majority of the games lists are not going to be in alphabetical order. Instead, they will have a numbering system to them, like you can see here. So that makes it a little bit wonky to be able to find your favorite game. For example, if you wanted to play Ninja Turtles: Turtles in Time, you'd have to remember that it's 004 as its number. And then if you wanted to play like Mega Man X, you'd have to find it as 005. So it's not a perfect experience, but you can still access these games. Now, if we press start, we can get into the main menu, and we do have a number of different options within here. For example, if we go into game settings, this gives us the ability to make adjustments to the game experience. We can go down here and like turn on auto save and auto load, so you can have that turned on. So when you exit out of game, it'll save it and then it'll load it when you start it back up. You can also adjust things like the aspect ratio and integer scaling, so you can do all of those things on a system level basis. Additionally, if you go all the way down to the bottom, we have per system advanced configuration. So you can make configurations per system here as well. So say, for example, if we go down to NES, and then here we can make all these changes specific to the NES console. So with this one in particular, if you want a special aspect ratio, you can set that here. Also, under the user interface settings, we can adjust our theme. So let's change it to like UI1 instead. So it'll take a moment to load up, but this is what it's going to look like instead. So you do have some options when it comes to the look and feel of your device. But for the most part, that's what the stock operating system can provide you, is the ability to basically easily navigate through your systems, choose your game, and then launch it from there. And that's really about it. So if you want just a simple experience, you can have that right out of the box. However, there are two more robust custom operating systems that are available on this device, and so that's what I want to go over. The first one is called Panfor Elec, and the other one is an old favorite called ArcOS. Now, Panfor Elec is forked off of a different operating system called Amber Elec. And that one's been around for years as well, but they're not supporting some of these newer devices that have been coming out. And so that's the reason why they've created this fork called Panfor Elec. Now, the name for Panfor Elec comes from the R36S handheld. This one's been around for about a year or two at this point, but it's had a bunch of different revisions and different panels, so different screens for it. And so Panfor is basically made for the Panel 4 version of this one. Now, the way that you install this operating system is very easy, and it's all explained on their website. But essentially, you just download the image, and then you would flash it to a microSD card, then put that microSD card in your device and boot it up. Once it's gone through the installation process, you're going to power down your device, remove the SD card, then put it in your computer. Then you will find a partition that's going to have a bunch of folders. You just drag and drop your games onto it. After that, when you start it up, you will have everything just pre-configured. And that's one of the nice things about Amber Elec, which Panfor Elec is based off of, is that they pre-configure the experience for you. So the development team that originally was behind it, they went through and they looked at every emulator and option that they have, and then they configure those options so that the moment you turn on the device, you can immediately get into your games. Another great thing about this operating system is you can make a bunch of adjustments to it within the operating system, much like we saw with the stock OS. So if we go into the game settings, we're going to have very similar settings here in terms of setting up things like, auto save and auto load, or being able to change out your aspect ratio and all that other stuff. And so it is nice that you're able to make all of those adjustments here, and some of these are going to be a lot more robust than you can find on the stock operating system as well. So you have additional things that you can check on. We've also got the ability to do per system configurations as well. So for each of your systems here, you can go in and make your adjustments too. Now, in terms of themes, you only got one to choose from with this operating system, and it's this one here based off of Artbook Next. Now, the nice thing about this one, though, is that it has a lot of different configuration options. If we go into user interface settings, then theme configuration, we've got a ton of different choices. For example, under system view style, I have it set to multi-artwork, but if we go down here, we've got a couple other options. So say, for example, we could do centered artwork single logo. So let's pick that instead. Now, when we go through, you can see that it's just one single system at a time. So you can kind of change up how it looks. And there are also a ton of other options that you can configure within the theme. So you can really tailor this to your experience, and all of it works really well. It's actually pretty cool. One other interesting thing is they have these overlay effects that will basically change the way that your emulation station works. So by default, the dirt overlay will actually be on. So essentially what this does is it adds a vignetting effect around the edges of the screen. You can see it's darker at each of the corners. So it just makes it a little bit more like old looking and a little bit more focused. Bear in mind, this is not going to affect how the game plays or anything. It's just how you're navigating through the menus. So to give you an idea of what kind of changes you can make to customize your experience, let's talk about, say, for example, this single logo transition. So by default, I just have it at the auto settings, but you have a bunch of others to choose from. So let's try this zoom bump one instead. And so what this means is as we transition between our different systems, the text right here for each of the system is going to be a little bit different. So this one, the animation is zoom bumps. You can see it zooms and then bumps. And so these are the kind of things that you can change in terms of the look and feel. Here's another example. I've changed it now to the swoop function. So this is what it looks like now. It just kind of swoops into place. So again, it's kind of neat that we have the same theme, but many different ways to enjoy it. Now, each of these operating systems do have network functions. However, this device does not have onboard Wi-Fi, so you'll need a network adapter. So something like this, which is a USB dongle, I'll leave it linked down below, and then an adapter to be able to plug it in via USB-C. So the idea is that you can plug this in and then add your network credentials, and that will allow you to log in. From there, you can do things like scrape box art and other media, and then also connect to tools like Portmaster. You could do some game streaming on it, or you could earn retro achievements. For me personally, I've just been plugging it in when I need it, for example, to scrape box art. So you can see here, I've gone and I've scraped my box art, and then it'll also show a video once it's playing as well. And so it's kind of a neat little function here just to kind of enhance the overall gameplay experience. Now, once you've scraped all your media, including the videos, then you can launch a screensaver. So I've already got it set up, but I can press select and then launch screensaver, and it's going to cycle through a bunch of games. And once I see one that I want to play, say for example this one right here, I can press the start button. It'll actually launch the game itself. So it's a really nice way to be able to choose what specific games you want to play. I've also gone through and done a couple more advanced things. For example, I've added an overlay here with the Game Boy Color. So you can see that I have these bezels on the left and right that allow me to use the correct aspect ratio, but then also just to give it a more grid-like effect. And so this is the overall setup that I kind of worked through last night to get it all configured. I've got a dedicated video talking about overlays and shaders and whatnot. I'll leave that link down below, but essentially all the stuff in that video will apply to the BATLEXP G350 as well. Now, the way to exit out of a game is you just press the menu and then start button, and that'll bring you back to the main menu. And that's really about it. So it's a very simple navigation experience. And earlier, I also mentioned that you can use a tool called Portmaster. So this will require you to be online, and you have to actually manually install it as well. It's a lot easier than you might think. You just have to take one single file, put it into the ports folder of your device, and then run it while you have Wi-Fi connected. From there, it's going to launch into Portmaster. I've also got a dedicated video about this experience as well, but essentially this will allow you to navigate through a list of a bunch of different games, including those that you can just play directly on the device, as well as some other commercial ports where you'll have to add your own game files. So this is what the menu will look like, and we can go through here in all ports, and they have nearly 1,000 games at this point, and most of them will be ready to run games, but some of them will be commercial ports as well. And all you have to do is just choose the game and then read the instructions. You can see up here it says that all the game files are included, the game is ready to play. So all you would have to do at that point is press the A button to install. It will then download and install all the files that you need, and then you can just start playing the game right after that. Now for commercial titles like, Stardew Valley, you can play that on here as well, but you will have to add your own game data files. I've got an entire Portmaster video and guide as well. So I'll leave that link down below as well, but yeah, that's essentially how Portmaster works. One of my favorite things about this handheld. So the way I see it, Panfor Elec is a really good kind of beginner's firmware in that if you've already tried out the stock operating system and you found it to be a little bit janky, you want something that's got more polish to it, then I would recommend this because the AmberElec team spent a lot of time getting this all set up. In fact, the original AmberElec website is really helpful. They got some excellent tutorials if you want to know how to set any of this stuff up. It'll walk you through the entire process. And it's great that we have Panfor Elec as an option for this handheld as well. Now, it doesn't have official support from the AmberElec team, but as far as I can tell, everything seems to be working well. So the main advantages of Panfor Elec is that it's more polished than the stock operating system. It's also been pre-configured, so you can mostly just start up your game. It's going to run the best emulator and the best settings for you. And once you've connected to Wi-Fi, you'll be able to scrape your media, so you'll be able to have nice box art and everything. And then also you can connect to Portmaster to be able to play your favorite PC ports. In addition, if you need to make any configuration changes, you do not need to have deep understanding of how RetroArch works. All you have to do is just press start, go into game settings, and you can make all of the adjustments right here for the most part. And so that's a quick look at Panfor Elec. It is a little bit more robust than stock operating system, will give you a little bit more of a polished experience without having to dive too far into the weeds in terms of setup. Okay, now let's talk about our next operating system, which is called ArcOS, and this has been around for a long time. In fact, it got started in 2021 with this particular chipset, and it's still going. Now, the thing about ArcOS is that it's slightly different in philosophy than AmberElec or Panfor Elec. This one is more focused on just getting into your games, giving you great performance, and not having too many things to worry about. For example, this does not have a robust menu system like we saw earlier, where you can go into the game settings and adjust things like your aspect ratio. Instead, you would have to go directly into RetroArch and do that on your own. Now, I made a dedicated ArcOS guide a couple years ago, and all of the stuff that's in that video still applies today, and I've got a written guide for it as well. And so I'm not going to overlap that guide just because I don't want to add an additional 20 minutes to this video. But yes, that ArcOS guide still applies for this device. And the process is again very similar in that you will just flash ArcOS to an SD card and then you'll put all your games on it and everything else. And that's about it. Now, because ArcOS is not officially supported on this specific device, there is one additional step you have to do. And for that, all you have to do is that once you've flashed it, you have to add an additional file to your microSD card before you boot it into the device. And I've got it all spelled out in my written guide, which I will have linked down below. And so the nuts and bolts of ArcOS is that you will have to go in and actually set everything up, and then you'll have to make some configurations to RetroArch to tailor it to your experience. Again, it is a bit more on the intermediate side compared to something like AmberElec, which comes pre-configured. And once you have it all configured, it's going to be a very similar experience. You can see here I've added my own overlay here to Game Boy Color. It's really just a different means to the same end. So let's talk about some of the differences we have between ArcOS and Panfor Elec. So number one here is we have different themes to choose from. We have 6 different options here. My favorite is actually this one called Switch. And so I'm going to switch over to that one, no pun intended. So this one gives you a horizontal menu to navigate through. And I just think it looks really nice and simple. So I really enjoy this one. By default, when you pick a system, you will navigate through via box art as well. And so this is kind of neat too, but you can also change that. So if I go into the UI settings here in theme configuration, under game list view style, I can change that to, say, for example, detailed. Now, when I go back into that same menu, it'll actually show like the box art as well as the name of the game and then some video as well. So you can really just kind of tailor how you want it to look on your device. This one is also Wi-Fi capable. So same thing here. You'd have to just plug it in here and then go into the options settings and then set up your Wi-Fi connection. It does also work with Portmaster, and it's going to be available right out of the box. You can see I've already installed a bunch of Portmaster games. You will also find that under Options and then go into Tools. Right there is Portmaster. So again, a lot of the functionality is going to be the same, but it's just a different menu to navigate through. Another thing that's really handy about ArcOS is that we have a bunch of different emulator options. So for example, if we go into emulator settings and then we pick a system, say for example, Sega Saturn, we pick this, and then between the emulators, you can see we have 5 or 6 different options to choose from. So right now I'm using a standalone version of Yaba-Sanshiro, which I think is the best one, but you've got a bunch of different options to choose from. And you can also set this up on a per game basis. So if one game runs better with one emulator, but another game runs better with a different one, you can set all that up as well. And the way this works is you would pick your system, then pick your game, and then say, for example, with this game, Clockwork Knight 2, I wanted to use a special emulator. So I would press select, go down to edit this game's metadata, and then here under emulator, I can choose that specific to the game. You can see that by default, it's using the standalone version of Yaba-Sanshiro, but maybe the RetroArch one works better. So you could select that here, and it's only going to save it for that one individual game. Another really handy feature of ArcOS is what they call quick mode. If we go into options, then advanced, if we go down here, you can see it says disable quick mode. That's because I've already enabled it, but essentially this will turn it on. And the way that quick mode works is that you would press the R3 button and power at the same time, and it will immediately shut down your device. For the other operating system, you have to press start, then go down to quit, and then shut down system. Now, one other thing that you can do with ArcOS is something that I actually made a full video about last year. You can basically simplify it to make it super easy for like children or people who don't know anything about electronics. So this device right here is set up with a custom version of ArcOS that I created from making that video. And so essentially, all I have to do here is just navigate through my box art and then launch my game here. So it's a very, very simple setup. And the nice thing about this setup is that you wouldn't have to be able to read, because you can just navigate through, pick your game based on the picture itself, as opposed to reading a list of games. And the setup for this is actually pretty simple. I've just made a favorites list. I'm using the Nintendo Switch theme right here, and then I've added custom box art, and then I've set it up to load directly into my favorites menu. And so that's exactly what I have set up here. Again, that's all covered in that other video, but this is just another option that you could do with the G350 if you would like. So in a nutshell, ArcOS is a more simplified operating system, but a little bit more advanced in the fact that you have to go into RetroArch to make some of your configuration changes, as opposed to the emulation station menu. However, if you're willing to put in the work, I do think that ArcOS will give you an overall better experience. It just is going to require a bit more configuration. For example, one of the most important factors for me with a custom operating system is how quickly it will boot. And ArcOS will boot up a lot faster than the other two options. In fact, it takes about 14-15 seconds altogether to boot, compared to the others that take about 26 or 27 seconds. So ArcOS will boot up almost twice as fast as the others, and it also has that quick mode function, which allows you to press R3 and power to shut it down very quickly as well. So between your three options, I would say that ArcOS will get you in and out of your games more quickly. Now, any of these operating systems will be able to play up through PS1 absolutely no problem. You can play the full catalogs for those systems. But the other ones, like Dreamcast, Nintendo 64, Sega Saturn, they're a little bit more hit and miss. And so you might be wondering, what is the performance difference between the two custom operating system options? Now, to be honest, they share a lot of the same code, and so the performance will be very similar between them, and you will have similar options. However, I did find a bit of a difference between them with some of these higher end systems. For example, with the default emulators for both Dreamcast on these devices, I found that ArcOS did give me a little bit faster performance. When playing Dead or Alive 2, I found that ArcOS was a couple seconds ahead of the Panfor Elec build. Now, I purposefully chose this game because it's pretty stuttery on this chipset no matter what, but you can see that you are getting a little bit better performance with ArcOS. Now, I did find that with Nintendo 64, the opposite was true. Now, Nintendo 64 is very hit and miss on this chipset, and you have to fiddle around with the different emulator options. But my preferred options for each of these, which includes the default emulator for Panfor Elec, and then the standalone Rice emulator for ArcOS, it does show a difference. And here I found that Panfor Elec did pull ahead by a couple seconds compared to ArcOS. Now again, this game is not really playable on this chipset, but it does just illustrate the fact that it is a little bit better on Amber Elec, but only by a smidge. In fact, the only emulator where I found a tangible big difference between the two was with Sega Saturn. For both of these, I'm using the standalone Yabusan Shiro emulator, and ArcOS is ahead by like 6 or 7 seconds. And so there's a tangible difference here. It's about 7 or 8 frames per second. So when it comes down to it, in terms of the high-end performance, none of those systems are going to be great, but if you're really trying to squeeze as much performance as possible, they're about the same, with a couple edges for ArcOS, except for Sega Saturn. That one is a lot better. So if you are specifically looking for the best performance, it is a bit hit and miss between the two, but I have just found that ArcOS gives me an overall better experience just in terms of boot time, as well as the shutdown time, and the ability to customize the device itself. And so for my own personal tastes, I'm going to be sticking with ArcOS. Yes, it took a little bit more time to configure, and again, I've got that whole ArcOS guide down below, but once I had it set up, I was very happy with it. So let me give you an idea of the Endgame setup with my ArcOS machine right here. I spent the evening last night setting it up, and I'm really happy with how it looks. So for example, here with Super Nintendo, I'm running an interpolation shader behind it. So essentially that is balancing out the pixels, making everything look nice and smooth. There are a couple different options. I recommend one called Pixel AA and then another one called Sharp Shimmerless. They are both really excellent. Now on top of that, I've added a CRT overlay. So you can see it's a little bit rounded at each of these corners, and that is that CRT effect. In addition, it has a slight scan line to it as well, which makes it look a bit more retro. And so this is the setup that I have for all my home console systems, a CRT effect over the top of it, and then also I have that shader running underneath to balance everything, and I think it looks great. Again, we are talking about a $35 handheld, and the fact that I have this nice balanced picture is just a really kind of exciting experience for me. Now for my handheld systems, I have a very similar setup, but I have it tailored to every system. So say for example here with Game Boy Advance, I'm using that interpolation shader again to balance everything out, and then I've also added an overlay here which has the Game Boy Advance logo at the bottom. So this allows me to have a balanced picture, but then this nice little bezel as well. And so this is the kind of setup that I have for my handheld systems, very similar. Okay, and so really that's about it when it comes to the operating system options that we have for the G350. I think that personally I like ArcOS better, just because it allows me to do a bit more configuration, and I do like tinkering and whatnot. But if you're looking for something that just is going to be an upgrade over stock OS without having to learn the ins and outs of RetroArch, then I would recommend Panfor Elec. And I think that both of these operating systems just add to the value of this handheld. Again, for $35, we have something that has these robust and mature operating system options, and so this makes it one of the best deals that you can find in the budget range, provided that we're not going to be spending hundreds of dollars in tariffs in the near future. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Are you going to change out your operating system or just stick with the stock one? As always, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful, and we will see you next time. Happy gaming.